I'm
Funding for the MacNeil Lehrer NewsHour has been provided by a grant from ODS Health Plans, the group medical plans that meet the needs of Oregonians by providing a broad range of medical and dental coverage and responsive service. And by the Collins Foundation. The Collins Foundation is dedicated to improving the quality of life in Oregon.
Good evening. I'm Jim Lehrer in Washington.
And I'm Robert MacNeil in New York. After tonight's news summary, Senators John Warner, Patrick Leahy, and Dennis DeConcini discussed the resignation of CIA Director James Woolsey. Then 3 experts on Russia analyzed the growing political crisis for President Yeltsin over Chechnya. And Charlene Hunter-Galt continues her second look at ways to curb teenage violence.
Funding for the MacNeil Lehrer NewsHour has been provided by the Archer Daniels Midland Company. With ADM ingredients in thousands of consumer products, it's no wonder ADM is called Supermarket to the World. And by New York Life, yet another example of the wise investment philosophy New York Life has been following for the last 150 years. And by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, and by the annual financial support from viewers like you.
CIA Director James Woolsey resigned today. In a surprise announcement issued by the White House late this afternoon, President Clinton said he accepted the resignation with regret. Mr. Clinton praised Woolsey for helping to advance and transform the CIA after the Cold War. Woolsey had been criticized by some members of Congress for his handling of the Aldrich Ames spy case. Woolsey refused to fire or demote anyone at the agency for failing to detect the CIA turncoat who sold secrets to Moscow for more than 8 years. Ames is now serving a life sentence. Today's White House statement did not say who would succeed Woolsey. We'll have more on the story right after the news summary. Jim?
President Clinton asked North Korea again today to free American Army pilot Bobby Hall. He has been held since December 17th when his helicopter was shot down in North Korean territory. The president's appeal came as Deputy Assistant Secretary of State Tom Hubbard met with North Korean officials. Hubbard, seen here arriving in Seoul, South Korea, ended the talks without agreement. North Korea has claimed Hall was on a spy mission. President Clinton disputed that at a White House ceremony this morning.
We have made it clear to the North Koreans that we want the prompt release of Airman Hall and that there is no reason for his detention. He was on a routine training mission, that's all. They made an error, which we have acknowledged, and drifted into North Korean airspace. We now have an administration official in North Korea, as you know, and talks are ongoing. And I think it would be premature for me to say anything else at this time. Let's give our people there a chance to do their work and see what happens.
This evening, a report by the official North Korea news agency said Hall had confessed to an illegal reconnaissance mission. Hall's co-pilot, David Heilemann, was killed when the helicopter was shot down. He was buried today in a private service near Tacoma, Washington.
Russia resumed air raids on the capital of Chechnya today, just one day after President Yeltsin vowed to stop the bombing attacks. A Grozny orphanage was destroyed in one raid. The children were in a bomb shelter and were not hurt. Russian ground forces advanced toward the capital, but there were conflicting reports that said the advance may have been halted. Later in the program, we'll discuss the political problem Chechnya represents for President Yeltsin. Rebels in Mexico's southern state of Chiapas today offered to resume peace talks with the government. The Indian rebels acted after the government agreed to let a church-led commission mediate the standoff. After the news, Mexico's battered currency recovered a bit on foreign exchange markets. It had fallen nearly 40% in the past week, due partly to the unrest in Chiapas.
President Clinton today named Congressman Dan Glickman of Kansas to be Agriculture Secretary. The 9-term Democrat lost his re-election bid in the November elections. He will replace Mike Espy, who resigned following allegations he improperly accepted gifts from businesses under his jurisdiction. Glickman spoke today at a White House ceremony.
My highest priority will be meeting your commitment to our farmers and ranchers and everyone in rural America. The commitment to sustain a solid economy that provides opportunity for growth and prosperity. I intend to keep your commitment to ensure that America's consumers have the world's most abundant, wholesome food supply. Today's farm programs have helped create those opportunities, a lesson we should never forget.
Incoming Senate Majority Leader Bob Dole, also of Kansas, praised Glickman. He said he expects the nomination to sail through the Senate. The developer of a new armor-piercing bullet today announced a delay in putting it on the market. A company announcement said it was because of criticism from police and others. Yesterday, some members of Congress said they would introduce legislation to ban any bullets that can penetrate bulletproof vests.
2 passenger buses crashed in Venezuela today. One of the buses then hit a roadside pipeline, causing it to rupture and explode. At least 30 people were killed in the accident and resulting fire. About 15 were injured. It occurred about 300 miles southeast of the capital, Caracas. There was a strong earthquake off the coast of northern Japan today. At least 2 people were killed and more than 230 were hurt. Authorities initially ordered evacuations of coastal areas because of fears that a tidal wave might hit, but canceled the warning soon after. Tremors could be felt as far away as Tokyo, where high-rise buildings were seen swaying. Most of the damage occurred about 350 miles north of the capital.
An Islamic fundamentalist group claimed today it killed 4 Catholic priests yesterday in Algeria. It's the same group that carried out the hijacking of an Air France jet in Algiers. The statement said the priests were murdered in revenge for the death of the hijackers. They were killed by French commandos who stormed the plane and released 169 hostages.
A federal judge in Little Rock, Arkansas, today ruled that a lawsuit against President Clinton will not go to trial until he has left office. Paula Jones, a former Arkansas state worker, has brought the sex harassment suit. In denying the charge, Mr. Clinton's lawyers claimed that defending the suit would interfere with the president's duties. The judge said that evidence gathering in the case can go forward. That's it for the news summary tonight. Now it's on to the CIA, Russia's revolution problem, and teenage violence.
The going of James Woolsey is our lead story tonight. He had a tough 2 years as Director of Central Intelligence, the toughest time coming with the Aldrich Ames case. Several members of Congress criticized Woolsey for not firing any top CIA officials for their failure to catch Ames in a nearly decade of spying for the Soviet Union. Woolsey spoke about that in a recent NewsHour interview, defending his decision to issue only reprimands to 4 CIA officials, including Deputy Operations Director Ted Price. A lot of people have trouble understanding, in light of what you've just said, the damage this man caused, the deaths this man caused, why the people who you have held responsible for allowing this to go on, all they got were letters and a folder, and people would say, wait a minute, Mr. Woolsey, if anything comparable to this happened in any other government agency or in any private business, there would be a lot more than letters put in people's folders.
Jim, I've gone through each of these cases very carefully over the course of the last number of days, not only read the whole Inspector General report, read a lot of the background files. I considered myself as functioning as essentially a judge in this matter. And of the 7 retired officers, 4 were very serious and received the only thing I can give them after they're retired, severe reprimands and this added provision that they would not be able to do any part-time work for the CIA.
There was nothing else you could do to them?
Not really. And for the 4 who are still active, on active service, given the fact that most of these events occurred back in the mid-1980s, their undertakings or lack of undertakings were such that, frankly, I did not believe it was fair and just to do more than that. It is a case, I described the Price situation of, for a 10-month period, not jumping on the football with vigor, but it would have been politically a lot easier for me to have fired a group of people and rolled some heads. But frankly, if they want somebody to do that, they have the wrong guy at the CIA. That's not my way. I don't think that's the fair way. I don't think it's the American way, and it's not the CIA way. I'm going to make the decisions one by one based on the merits, and that's what I've done.
Now some reaction to today's resignation. It comes from three senators: the outgoing co-chairman of the Senate Intelligence Committee, Dennis DeConcini, Democrat of Arizona; the other co-chairman, John Warner, Republican of Virginia; and a former committee chairman, Patrick Leahy, Democrat of Vermont. Senator DeConcini, was this a forced or a voluntary resignation?
I like to recall the words of Al Gore during the Democratic Convention. It was time for them to go, and it was time for Mr. Woolsey to go. He had a great opportunity here, and he did institute some changes, but he failed to respond to a massive problem within that agency that needed addressing. We just saw his remarks, the Inspector General report that he said he read so carefully. We read it too in our committee. There were 23 identified people who were at fault, and Mr. Woolsey elected, and it's his judgment to do that. I just happen to disagree, as did the committee, that only 11 of them should be considered any kind of discipline. And nothing severe happened to anybody, and he could have taken much better action. How can you expect a change in there if you're going to be able to permit somebody to steal the crown jewels of the Central Intelligence Agency, giving them to your Cold War adversary, the then former Soviet Union, and all you're going to end up is getting a letter in your file? It's not going to change the culture out there, and you're going to have more problems if you don't make those changes.
Senator Warner, do you think that we should interpret Mr. Woolsey's resignation that the president then agrees with what Senator DeConcini just said, that Mr. Woolsey did not act vigorously enough in cleaning out the Ames case?
I spoke with the White House today on this matter. They contacted me, and it's clear that Director DeConcini initiated his own resignation. But the good news is that the president, who is spending more and more time on intelligence, issued today, that is, advised me through his senior advisor, that he's looking at a restructured organization, a stronger organization. He is going to submit to Congress the strongest possible budget number for intelligence, recognizing its importance to our nation. And he sees a convergence of the new director and the work of a presidential commission, which I initiated together with the help of Chairman DeConcini and many others, in getting through the Congress. So while we're sorry to see, in many respects, a valued public servant come to this type of an ending, we're, I think, heartened by a president with more hands-on and desire to strengthen intelligence.
You agree with Senator DeConcini, though, that that James Woolsey should have gone, and he did do the right thing in resigning for whatever reason that it was pushed or shoved?
Jim Woolsey I've worked with for 20 years, a very able man, and he knows how to read Washington, D.C. He's an old Washington hand, and I think that he looked at what's in the best interests of the CIA and its thousands of dedicated employees, and he came to the conclusion, I've done my best, now it's time to move on.
Senator Leahy, do you think it's in the best interest of the CIA for Jim Woolsey to move on?
I think it is, and I think what John Warner just said is very, very accurate. It had reached a point where there was a lack of confidence on the Hill. Dennis DeConcini, as chairman of the Intelligence Committee, has raised some very, very good questions that needed to be raised, and there was not a confidence they were being answered. Jim Woolsey is an extraordinarily bright person, a very dedicated American. But it is time now really to have a new CIA. We have too much of this attitude at the agency that is still the old post-Cold War attitude, a feeling that if we have a mistake, we're going to take care of them in-house, not answerable outside. That does not fit with the way our country is today. But it's also not serving the president well as we go into approaching this next century. We've had massive changes in the former Soviet Union. We face an enormous threat from fundamentalist terrorism, especially state-sponsored terrorism, and we do not have adequate defenses in this country for that. And we are also going to have limited resources. There is not going to be a blank check to the CIA or any other department in our government that there has been over the past few years. So with all of that coming together, things are going to have to change, or the policymakers of this country are not going to have confidence in the product that they receive from the CIA.
Is it your impression that Jim Woolsey bought into the old culture rather than the new culture?
I think Jim Woolsey, in some ways, was a damned if you do, damned if you don't situation. He came in, all these mistakes happened before he was there. And he is correct when he said to you in the earlier interview, politically it would have been easier just to say, I'm going to clobber all these people. But in this case, the political response also would have been the better one, because the mistakes did happen. They were
And
not.
sometimes the political response is the right response.
Yes,
the right
it rarely happens, but it really is. But all these mistakes happened before he came there.
Yeah.
If there's a criticism of him, it's because he didn't do something afterward.
Senator Leahy is so correct that none of this problems of Alder James per se lies with Director Woolsey.
That's right.
He was not there. He was not there. And John Warner and our report of the committee points that out very well. It's aftermath of what Mr. Woolsey could have done, or at least in the committee's judgment, we felt should have done more than what he did. It's really past history, and I think Senator Warner points it out, and I talked to the President about the need to move on, and that's what we have to do. And Senator Warner's commission that we legislated this year has got an opportunity to do it, but that's going to take 18 months. And Senator Warner will be on that. What's important is that a new director be nominated and confirmed swiftly, and that person get on with it and reorganize that agency now.
Senator Warner?
Just don't want to focus too much attention on the Ames case. Indeed, it was a tragic event in our history. But Jim Woolsey had difficulty in reaching what I call a bipartisan consensus with members of Congress. Why, I do not know, because he'd had a lot of experience. But almost from day one, it tended to be on a confrontational basis. Apart from the Ames case, the Senate committee, under the leadership of the chairman and myself, enacted a law this year to try and forge a closer working relationship between the CIA and the FBI, which historically had not been in place and indeed contributed in some ways to the Ames tragedy. Jim Woolsey resisted the statutory changes. He resisted the presidential initiative, the commission initiative, which was finally accepted by the president. So there were a number of areas where he had very strong differences with members on Capitol Hill. Now, as Chairman DeConcini says, the president has given us assurances he's going to move swiftly, pick a man or woman with experience and a person that can establish instant credibility and working relationship with Capitol Hill. There can be no time gap in intelligence.
But I think the credibility is absolutely important. John is so right in that, because the credibility is what's been damaged, and it's going to color everything.
Outside credibility or out? Or
No, the credibility
public,
of the oversight committees and credibility within the administration, whether it's this administration or any other administration. But then they're going to have to understand that we have a new world out there, and there are a lot of new threats that the agency has not dealt with in the past. They're there that they're going to have to gear up with, and it's going to require a lot of new thinking in an agency that doesn't always move quickly to new thinking.
One of the important things for us to focus on in the future, in my opinion, and Senator Warner touched on it, is that the intelligence community, not just the CIA, the NSA, the NRO, the Department of Defense, have all got to realize that the oversight of Congress is there, it's there permanently, and it's going to be involved in what the CIA and our intelligence community does. And you've got to face up to it.
More so now than before?
More so now because of the Ames case.
Because of the Ames case.
Because of the failures, and it's rightfully so. When Senator Leahy was on that committee, he had problems just like Senator Warner and I did, trying to get information from those agencies, trying to control their budgets. They do a darn good job. They got tremendous people working there. But there is no real central authority and any vision and plan. And that's what Senator Warner and our committee tried to do this year.
Well, let me ask all three of you about this question that I remember when Jim Woolsey came in, Senator Warner, and we talked about on this program and elsewhere. It was a lot of stories in the press about here came Jim Woolsey from the outside, and he was brought in from the outside to run the agency. But in order to run the agency properly, he had to be accepted. He had to have credibility inside as well as outside. How does anybody come in now and take over this agency and walk that road?
It's a tough job, and I'm not sure anybody can do it, but somebody's got to try. And this president, as Senator Warner said, is committed to try to do it. He's got to have somebody that's prepared to change the culture. That's not easy. When you're doing this kind of work for your government, you kind of conclude that I'm a little above it. I'm doing something that the president reads every day. I don't have to worry about the cost. I don't have to worry about notifying the FBI if somebody's doing something that they're not supposed to do. Nobody knows what I'm doing. I don't have to tell the
Jim, if I
oversight
I think
committees.
one big mistake.
Add
you
a
could
word.
one big mistake would be
One second, Senator Warner, yes.
if the new person came in thinking that everybody in the agency wants to be protected from this kind of oversight. I've had a lot of people at the agency at very high levels tell me that they are concerned the way this is going. They understand and realize that there is going to be oversight, and we ought to start cooperating with it and doing it. And if mistakes are made, let's address them and move on.
Yeah, Senator Warner?
Well, on the positive side of this abrupt ending is the president now recognizes that he's got to spend more time on intelligence. It's vital importance to our security, and the fact that intelligence, be it the CIA or, as Chairman DeConcini said, the collective effort and work product of the various intelligence entities, it is a force multiplier as we draw down the size of our defense structure. I hope we've stopped that drawdown, but the degree to which the United States has better intelligence, the fewer troops we would need to employ in areas of the world which is becoming more trouble.
Well, Senator Warner, let me ask you, do you think that the president should go outside the agency? What kind of person, what kind of person should run the CIA now?
Two qualities. That person has got to start from day one. They can't go there and have any on-the-job training. They've got to have a background of experience that enables them to establish a credibility within the defense community and with Capitol Hill. Remember, Capitol Hill is not a force out there just to criticize. We're the ones that have to supply the money. And we also have to be individually and collectively in a position to answer to the public that what went wrong will not go wrong again, and that we still need to take the public taxpayers' dollar and support a strong intelligence for America. Now, that's a tough job when some of our colleagues are calling for the abolishment of the CIA.
So you think it should be an intelligence professional?
Not necessarily a professional, one who is thoroughly experienced in national security and hopefully especially within intelligence, and who is recognizable on Capitol Hill as an individual who doesn't have to start on a learning curve, can take over from day one, because you cannot gap for a period of time America's intelligence. It's got to be just as strong today as it is tomorrow and the day after, and hopefully stronger.
What would be on your list of qualifications, Senator Leahy?
Well, mine would be very similar to what Senator Warner said. I mean, you can't, this is not something where you have amateur hour or enlightened amateurism to run it. It's got to be somebody who has the confidence
In other words,
of the
you couldn't
president.
bring somebody in from the private sector or, say, from academia or in some other field and say, okay,
No,
run the Central Intelligence
I'm not saying
Agency?
that. I mean, I'm just saying you can't have somebody come in there and spend the next 6 months trying to find out what's going on, because there is so much in there and so many things that are just waiting to bite you if you don't know it. And the president has got to have the confidence of that person in such a way that if there's a crisis, can look across the table at them and say, okay, what's really happening here? Just cut to it, and not have this person thinking, geez, did I get the right stuff or not?
Well, Jim, I somewhat agree, but I think you need somebody new. I think you need somebody that is somewhat outside. You can't have a good old boy going down there and taking this over and getting co-opted, as I believe Mr. Woolsey was. That's easy to happen down there, because you want to build morale, you want to have support in the agency, and one way to do that is to fight Congress for more budget money and fight the administration. You got to have somebody that's willing to go in there and make some changes, some tough changes, and of course he has to have, or she has to have, the full backing of the president. And I think that's what we're going to see come along here.
What kind of person do you think?
Well, you know, I've talked to the president about and made some recommendations to him, and one of the ones that's already been talked about is John Deutsch, the Deputy Secretary of Defense. He was quite critical of the National Reconnaissance Organization when the president appointed he and Mr. Woolsey to review what John Warner and myself and our committee found out of their expenditures without authorization. He came out critical of it.
That's the big building and all of
Yes,
that.
sir. And to me, that demonstrated some courage, because the easy way to go was, well, you know, we'll work on it. We maybe made a few mistakes.
Finesse it a little bit.
But he didn't do it. And that's the kind of person that I think wouldn't have to play catch up, but is not an insider.
I see. John Deutsch
Jim,
is on the top of the list. Wait, would you buy that, Mr.
I would
Senator
buy
Warner?
it very definitely. And also, with the new Republican-controlled Congress, I would anticipate John Deutsch would be swiftly confirmed because he has very carefully laid a strong foundation of credibility in his current position, and that credibility is transferable to this other position.
And that position is Deputy Secretary.
Number two man.
There are some others too. I think Ambassador Crow
That's
in
Crow.
Admiral Crow.
Admiral Crow, Ambassador Crow now at the UK for us would be excellent. He's an outsider from the standpoint he hasn't been depth in this for some time, but he understands it, and he's a man that is willing to make changes. That's what needs to be done in my judgment. We've got to make some changes.
And somebody can give bad news to both the President and the Congress and stand behind it when there is bad news.
All right, gentlemen, we'll see what happens. Thank you all three very much.
Still ahead on the NewsHour, Yeltsin's Chechnya crisis and preventing teenage violence. Next, the Russia story. As President Yeltsin and the armed forces apply more force against the Chechen rebels, more dissent and more questions arise in Moscow. We start with a report on both fronts from Ian Williams of Independent Television News.
Russian fighter bombers swept low over the suburbs of Grozny this morning, dropping bombs on outlying areas and on the strategically important village of Argun, 9 miles from the capital. Among the buildings hit, several homes and an orphanage, where the children had already sought shelter in the basement before the bomb struck. Yet, according to the Russian Air Force, this never happened. Aviation does not operate on Grozny. We strictly observe the orders of the president to stop bombing, they said in a statement tonight. On the ground, Russian forces, supported by attack helicopters, have advanced further. Chechen officials claim the storming of the city has begun, though the Russians deny that, calling today's move an approach towards the outskirts of Grozny. While in Moscow, more confusion. The secretary of the powerful Security Council, which has been making policy on Chechnya, appeared unaware of the latest bombing.
I don't have information that there was bombing in the city of Grozny today. I ask you to go and check your facts.
Protesters against the fighting took their message to the building of the presidential administration, but found they were unwelcome, police breaking up their protest. There was no violence, and they moved off quickly. But it did demonstrate the authorities' growing irritation with the tide of criticism aimed at Mr. Yeltsin, not least from his one-time closest supporter.
Why bomb Grozny? If we are bombing the Grozny, then probably it is not the gang of the criminals. But at least it is the regime that is getting at least some kind of the support of the people who are being armed. And then if it is the case, then the negotiations and the chances to find a compromise is much better policy than the bombing.
Yesterday, the president addressed the nation for the first time since he sent the troops in. He sought to justify that, combining a tough line on the need to impose order with his promise to stop the bombing. The address was widely criticized in today's newspapers, which have been increasingly outspoken in their attacks on Mr. Yeltsin. The liberal Izvestia ridiculed his statement that the first stage of the operation is over. Stage 1, hundreds dead, thousands injured, hundreds of thousands homeless, it said in a banner headline. If Mr. Yeltsin's aim has been to demonstrate that he does have a strategy in Chechnya, that he is in control, it may have been seriously undermined by the actions of his own Air Force today.
Joining me now are David Remnick, a staff writer for The New Yorker magazine and the author of Lenin's Tomb, a book about the collapse of the Soviet Union. Leon Aron, a Russian emigre, is a resident scholar at the American Enterprise Institute in Washington and recent author of The Emergence of Russian Foreign Policy. He's also writing a biography of President Yeltsin. Sergei Grigoriev was President Gorbachev's deputy spokesman from 1990 to 91. He's now a visiting professor at Northeastern University and a senior research fellow at the John F. Kennedy School of Government at Harvard. David Remnick, how serious a political crisis is this for Yeltsin's presidency?
Well, it's a political disaster. You just saw on television Yegor Gaidar, his former prime minister, one of his strongest supporters, in no uncertain terms criticizing what's going on. The situation in the Kremlin is extremely split. It's a great fog, a great mystery what's going on there, why these decisions have been taken. No economic pressure was put to bear on Grozny, on Chechnya. No great political measures were even taken. And all of a sudden, a military conflict breaks out to the hue and cry of nearly everyone in the country. It's inexplicable why Yeltsin has done this.
Leon Aron, does this threaten the Yeltsin presidency?
I don't think it threatens the presidency in a very direct way. That is, I don't think there's going to be a coup or rebellion or even mass, I mean hundreds of thousands of demonstrators on the street. But it clearly, I think, epitomizes the beginning of the end of the Yeltsin phase of the Russian Revolution. In other words, I think, like Gorbachev before him, Yeltsin, by his very success, that is, he took the country beyond the barricades, beyond the revolution, but he seemed to be at a loss, by the way, for almost a year now, as to how to husband and till the land that he's freed of giant boulders and rotten stumps. He began to flounder. He began to, lose strategy and play petty court politics, very reminiscent of his party past. I think the Chechnya affair epitomizes the crisis that's been eating away at the Yeltsin administration for quite a while now.
Mr. Grigoriev, how do you read the confusion that we've just heard about in Moscow?
Well, I would certainly agree both with David and Leon that this is a major crisis for President Yeltsin. I would also say that this is a real challenge for the West's attitude and for the Western relations with Russia, because at this point we can see how all the real allies of the West are being alienated and angry at Mr. Yeltsin. All those who brought Mr. Yeltsin to power today are in the opposite camp, in the camp of the opposition. And the only forces which support Yeltsin today are those same hardliners and fascists that he himself has been fighting against. I think it's a real crisis and it's a real problem.
Let's go back over this a little bit. Most commentators here that I've read seem to defend Yeltsin's right to intervene to stop the secession of Chechnya, to stop it breaking out of the Russian Federation. Let's go around, starting with you, Mr. Grigoriev. Do you agree that he had the right to do this?
Well, I first of all would say that he had the right to issue this question. He had the right to look for a solution. But I don't think that anybody in the world today, in a small world, has the right to start a genocide of the peaceful population. That's where I categorically disagree that Yeltsin has the right to go and bomb and kill there. And that's what is happening today. I would say that, of course, you can explain it by the threat of disintegration of the Russian Federation, by the fact that Chechnya was breaking away and was not, in fact, part of Russia, although Russia has been considering it part of Russia. But nevertheless, I think that not all the options for negotiations, for peaceful solution of the crisis have been exhausted, have been explored.
David Remnick, how do you feel on the basis of his right as president to take military action if he couldn't force the Chechen leadership to stop their secession?
Well, this is a classic confrontation of two rights, of sovereignty, the right to sovereignty, and also the right to the declaration of oneself as a nation, in conflict with the sovereignty of Russia. What's more important is how you go about dealing with this crisis. And to willy-nilly start bombing civilian populations, and then to lie about it in a situation where you have a more or less free press showing what's actually going on, just points up to the situation that Mr. Aron has pointed to, where Boris Yeltsin has really hit the wall. And I think this is a process that has been going on for at least a year.
How can you explain the decision-making process that led to this, Mr. Aron?
Well, this is indeed part of the problem. When Yeltsin began to lose sight of the strategy, when Yeltsin began to lose this marvelous touch that, in fact, brought him to power and endeared him for quite a while to the millions of Russians, he began to shed, little by little, all the advisors that were independent, smart, brilliant, sometimes politicians, and really big figures, and surround himself sort of in the fashion of the former party leader with the yes men. As far as we know now, there's truly nobody in the government now who could go and argue with Yeltsin. I mean, they're almost all gone, or give him an objective, unadulterated opinion of what's going on. And I think this is...
Aaron, as you well know, from Yeltsin's memoirs, his last volume of memoirs, he says that the person closest to him politically is his bodyguard. It's almost like a classic czarist fairy tale, a disaster. And the cover of Yeltsin, the cover of Izvestia, the first page here, says, who is ruling the country? Yeltsin, Chernomyrdin, the prime minister, or General Korzhakov, his bodyguard? I mean, it is well known throughout Moscow.
This is a satirical headline in a way. I mean,
no, but it's absolutely dead serious that General Korzhakov, his bodyguard, is in the business of policy, is in the business of writing letters to the prime minister suggesting new economic policy, for example. Whereas the much finer heads that used to be around Yeltsin 2-3 years ago are now in the wilderness, are now in the political wilderness.
Yeah, Mr. Aaron, continue.
Yes, if I may continue, of course, I would add Yeltsin's tennis coach to the coterie of people he trusts, and I could relate to that. But there is something, there are very troubling historical ramifications in all of this, because throughout Russian history, a waning political leader tended to start what an advisor to Nicholas II in 1904 called a little victorious war. And those wars on Russian periphery led to very serious changes in Russian political life, sometimes benign. For example, the reforms of Alexander II started after his father, Nicholas I, lost the Crimean War.
Excuse me interrupting, but are you suggesting that Yeltsin is using this war to prop up his political position?
I think that Yeltsin is using this war to show that he could still do things, that he's in charge, that he is a master of Russia. The problem is that the historic tradition and sort of the Russian political culture forces him to show it, to show the strength and to show this initiative in one area where Russia has traditionally done it, which is in war.
What's your comment on that, Mr. Grigorev?
Well, my comment would be the comment made once by one of Napoleon's ministers, Joseph Fouché, who said it's more than a crime, it's a mistake. And I think that Yeltsin's advisors were trying to boost his popularity, and they made this terrible miscalculation. They thought, and I would agree here with Mr. Aaron, they thought of a little victorious war to boost his popularity, while Yeltsin's rating is really plummeting down. While it is clear that most of the local elections in 78 out of 89 constituent parts of the Russian federations were won by Mr. Yeltsin's opponents. Only 10% was won by Mr. Gaidar's party, but today even Mr. Gaidar's party is in opposition. So it's very clear that they were trying to look for a solution. Besides, there is oil. Oil is involved, and I wouldn't disconnect it from the general context of discussion. Russia announced that beginning with January 1st, it's lifting all the export oil quotas and licenses. As a result, the oil in Chechnya, however little it is there, becomes more important, and I think we shouldn't disregard that.
Okay, let me turn this to another aspect. David Remnick, you alluded to it. Isn't it a sign of health in Russia's very new democracy that there's all this open dissent? The police are not arresting or beating up demonstrators. The press and television are free to report from Chechnya and are doing so and greatly influencing the situation. Should we not consider this a sign of democratic health?
Yeah, but to some degree, and it is a mixed bag. The press in some areas is government line, in some areas like Izvestia and some other papers and independent television are doing much better. In that way, it's a sign of health as compared to, say, 5 years ago. But neither we nor Russia should fall into fits of self-congratulation over this. This is a victory that has been won, and I hope that it will be preserved. The great fear in Moscow, I should say, is that the Chechnya conflict will be one of a series of excuses for the Yeltsin administration to call off the elections of 1996. Now, at this point, that may be a little bit paranoid. I don't know.
Which will be the next time the presidency comes up, as well as the parliamentary elections.
Absolutely. You know, Yeltsin saw the elections of last December, in which his supporters did not do very well at all, in which neo-fascists and communists did quite well. And they looked at the 1996 elections, and they're very worried, and they may be looking for reasons to call those off.
Mr. Aaron, what do you think this says about the health of Russian democracy?
I think this is the story behind the Chechnya story is precisely what you just mentioned, Robin. There is it is really a test of maturity for a Russian democracy. Not just for Yeltsin, who, of course, has been synonymous with Russian democracy until a few months ago and certainly until today, but also for the ability of the Russians to translate the opinion, the majority of the majority of the people. As far as I know, 2 out of 3 Russians oppose this war, to translate it into an effective pressure on the government that would lead first to scaling down and then eventually to ending this conflict, then proceeding towards the parliamentary elections this year in '95 and then presidential elections in '96. Should Russian democracy overcome this traditional Russian urge for little victorious wars, then I think we also should reevaluate our assessment of, say, NATO expansion, because it looks like Russia then might be a fairly equitable partner of what the Russians call civilized world.
Mr. Grigoriev, you mentioned it earlier. What are the consequences for the United States in this situation? What does Washington have riding on this?
I think that it's also a very complicated question. On one hand, of course, Washington says that it's Russia's internal affair, and no other country so far recognized Chechnya's independence, and it's a tough choice for the United States. On the other hand, what I can see talking to people in Moscow is happening, and very rapidly, that the United States is losing its most natural allies, Russian Democrats. A lot of Russian Democrats, people of democratic views and convictions, are really upset that the United States is not doing much to stop the bloodshed, to prevent the bloodshed. I can see, for example, the reaction here in the media. We're not getting full reports by Sergei Kovalyov, a famous dissident who is now in Grozny with Chechens and who was appealing to all the leading world nations, including the United States and to the UN. We're not reading much from what was said the Sunday before by Solzhenitsyn. Everyone is trying to say, come on, who are you supporting? Look what's happening now. It is one step before Russia plunges into authoritarian dictatorship again. How come we are not seeing the United States on the fair side? Mm-hmm. We have used to see the United States on the side of the good guys.
Mm-hmm. What do you think the stakes are for Washington?
Well, the stakes for Washington are enormous. Remember, Russia is not a democratic state. It is a fledgling democratic state at best. The shoots of democracy are very, very tender indeed, and this crisis is a breakthrough moment. And we have to look not only at the Chechen crisis as a regional crisis, but one as a great test for democracy. And I think it won't be the last one. I think there will be attempts in the circle of Yeltsin's advisors to do things like calling states of emergency in various regions, and possibly in Moscow because of the crime problems, say. And so these challenges to what we call civil society will be enormous, and it will go on not just this month, but it'll take us right through 1996.
Do you have a brief comment, Mr. Aaron, on the line Washington's taking so far?
Well, I think publicly the line is the only one we could take, that is, recognizing that this is within Russia and Russia has the right to restore order. I hope, however, that on a less public level, we are communicating to Moscow what we have just said, that we would view that as a test of Russian democracy, as a test of, therefore, as a test of how credible our partnership with Moscow is, and therefore how in the future Russia will be or will not be accepted into the family of civilized nations.
Well, Mr. Aaron, Mr. Grigoriev, and David Remnick, thank you for joining us.
Now and again, teenage violence. Next month, public television, in cooperation with a coalition of private groups, will launch a multi-year effort to deal with youth violence in our society. The NewsHour examined the problem last summer. Charlene Hunter-Gault spoke to people with new approaches. Here's a second look at one of those conversations.
It's never too early to start trying to break the cycle of violence among the young, the experts say.
Well, I'm going to tell my big brother on you. Go ahead, I'll tell my brother. Freeze. What's happening there?
But they're fighting.
They're fighting. How was Kiera talking? Mean, that's right.
This is a class in conflict resolution and mediation. Teachers are applying skills they've learned in a national program called Resolving Conflicts Creatively. While it is a school-based program, it's not just for tots.
We have rules for mediation, first of all. There's no name calling. If you're talking, Wanda cannot interrupt you at any time. She has to wait till you finish, and she can give us her story. Okay? Do you understand that? Andrea? That's either yes or no.
Yes.
We're here to solve the problem. We don't need that. Okay, so...
I understand this.
I'm saying to both of you.
I've been mediated before because of conflicts that I've had with people. It's helped. You say what you want to say to that person, and there's certain boundaries that you cannot pass.
We want win-win situations. What we mean by win-win situations is we want both persons to come out and say, this really works. I feel good. If one person doesn't feel good and the other person thinks they got the best of it, we didn't do anything.
No one is more committed to win-win situations than Linda Lantieri, a former school teacher and principal in New York's East Harlem. Lantieri is the coordinator of the New York-based National Resolving Conflicts Creatively program. In 300 schools nationwide, from New York to Alaska, the RCCP, as it is called, is the largest school-based violence program in the country. We talked with Lantieri about the program and about youth violence in general.
Linda Lantieri, thank you for joining us. What can you tell us about the reasons behind the upsurge in violence among young people?
Many of us at this point know that the United States is #1 in terms of homicide in the industrialized world, and that rate really is true of all races, of all backgrounds. I mean, we're seeing violence erupting in rural and suburbia as well as we are in the urban areas. What we do know is that often kids who have experienced or witnessed violence themselves is probably the strongest variable that moves young people without any kind of intervention to being violent to others or themselves.
What is the premise of your program?
I think what we're saying in the Resolving Conflict Creatively program is that violence is preventable. It's not inevitable. Kids can learn concrete skills at a very early age. We begin in kindergarten to begin to deal with conflict in a very different way, one that does not escalate into violence. But I think we're also useful to the young people who don't know how to say what it is they need and feel. We have as many parents come to us who are happy that their kids are able to tell what it is they want and need, as we are about parents who are happy that their aggressive kids have become more assertive. To me, again, I go back to the concept of emotional literacy.
Emotional literacy?
Yes.
That's
Yes.
a good term.
We don't know how to tell each other what we need and feel. We do it in very destructive ways very often, and to me, these are lifelong skills. We've been around for 10 years now, well before the epidemic of violence began to frame us as a violence prevention program. We felt that these emotional and social skills should be a basic of kids' education in general.
How does it work?
Well, we work with the adults in kids' lives first. We work with administrators of school, teachers, parents, who then learn these skills and learn how to, in fact, begin to teach these skills to young people.
Like, for example?
For example, what might they learn? Some of the skills involved how to listen better. We call it active listening, where we really are able to hear each other's point of view and be able to say back what we have heard someone say. So often conflict starts very early on with misunderstandings, simply in communication. We learn how to negotiate what's called a win-win solution, where we understand that people have needs and wants, and we move beyond positions to what it is they need and want, get those things on the table and begin to come to a solution we both could feel good about. Very often we look at conflict as a win-lose situation, but I think what we're really saying is that conflict is a natural, normal part of life.
But what kind of conflict are you talking about? Because in my reading of the literature of youth violence,
yes,
it happens when, I hear this all the time now, some kid disses another kid, disrespects him, and that could be just in passing in the street. He could bump him or accidentally rub up against him at a dance.
Any conflict escalates quite quickly. it could de-escalate that quickly. To me, we have the potential always of, I always think of having the Mother Teresa and the Hitler in each of us, and but for a stroke of a coin, we are often presented with bringing hope and positive situation to the other. And often what happens with conflict is somebody disses somebody else, and if the next act is one of violence, whether it's verbal violence or whatever, we could be pretty assured that that conflict is going to escalate. What we are helping kids learn is that very thing, that conflict can escalate with one remark after another. And as a result, we could take control and begin to de-escalate that conflict in some of the very same ways. So again, it's that kind of first interaction, which is crucial, by the way, because if words are exchanged and it's not changed right there, then immediately the escalation happens for lots of reasons. Availability of the weapon, but also the escalation happens because that young person is touching in that moment of time that free-floating bank of anger that he or she carries around with him or her all the time.
Yeah, that was the point I was just going to ask you. What about this?
It's not about that present situation.
Exactly.
It's not about that. So to also help kids realize that about their own unspent anger that has been unexpressed, and knowing that we often touch that in others, and to sometimes not take some interaction like that so personally. I mean, I could give you an actual example. There was a time a couple of years ago where many kids in New York City were getting killed for their sheepskin coats. And at that very time, one of our young people from one of our local high schools got off a subway stop in East Harlem. He was a mediator. And in seconds, surrounded by 3 other guys who basically did the same, said the same line that had been said all week, and kids had lost their lives. Instead, this young man looked at these 3 boys and said, "This is amazing. I was just getting ready to do that," as he unzipped his coat and handed it, and even asked who he should hand it to, by the way. Said, who should I hand this to? Gave it over. Well, what happened is that the 3 young people were so almost disturbed because the script wasn't going the way it should go. They took the coat, by the way. But they began to rend themselves because they felt like, what's happening here? The script has changed. Now, if it ended there, it would be a problem for me, because what happens to the justness in the world? What that young man was able to do is to go back to that Resolving Conflict Creatively school, have the foresight of a teacher to call a group of kids together, where he began to tell about what had happened and express the anger. And in moments, one of the kids said, "How much was that coat?" One kid said, he said $119. He said, "Aren't there 92 seniors here? That's a little over $1.50 each." And in about 3 days' time, they collected the money. Now, that's the kind of thing that we talk about when we talk about a village. Because, if he were left with, "Isn't that wonderful?" He used his conflict resolution skills on the corner, but he used them in a very important way and was able to hold his anger to express it in a more appropriate place.
But what about the kids who took the coat? I mean, there's 3 of them for the one that you claimed.
Right. You just keep doing what you do, and you hope to get to as many young people as possible. And we're finding in our work that it's best to be as preventive as possible, meaning to get to kids before they're at great, great risk of violence. On the other hand...
And when is that?
Well, for us, it's pre-kindergarten. It's in Head Start. But on the other hand, I have seen time and time again that even when kids are at risk of violence and have been violent themselves, there's still always hope. Young people really don't want to be doing what they're doing sometimes around this issue of violence. In this very room, for example, there were 11 young people that had put each other in a hospital over a gang fight and wanted to sit around a table and begin to talk out their differences in another way. Previous to that, no one had afforded them the opportunity to do it in that way.
So are you working to engage the critical mass of kids who are young and in school, and is that...
That's where we're beginning. I mean, I think we're really saying eventually this work in conflict resolution and multicultural understanding needs to be a basic of every kid's curriculum. Needs to be a very fabric of schools, that to be educated, one needs the emotional and social domain as much as we need the academic domain. So I think that's the first thing we're saying. And if we were saying that, then we would love the Resolving Conflict Creatively program to be in every school in America, as Marion Wright Edelman keeps hoping it is.
Who's the head of the Children's
Yes,
Defense Fund?
yes. But again, I feel that in getting to the critical mass, we're hopefully also going to get to the kids who are very at need, who have seen violence, who are experienced violence, who see no other way of being. And I speak to many young people in that category too. And when they're presented with another way of doing things, they too have some real openness to doing it another way.
Well, Linda Lantieri, let's hope you're right.
Thank you.
All the best.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Again, the major stories of this Wednesday. CIA Director James Woolsey resigned. A U.S. diplomat failed to win the release of an American Army pilot being held in North Korea. President Clinton denied the pilot was on a spy mission. And Russia stepped up its attacks in the breakaway region of Chechnya. Good night, Robin.
Good night, Jim. That's the NewsHour for tonight, and we'll see you again tomorrow night. I'm Robert MacNeil. Good night.
Funding for the MacNeil-Lehrer NewsHour has been provided by the Archer Daniels Midland Company. With ADM ingredients in thousands of consumer products, it's no wonder ADM is called Supermarket to the World. And by New York Life, yet another example of the wise investment philosophy New York Life has been following for the last 150 years. And by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, and by the annual financial support from viewers like you.
This is PBS.
Funding for the MacNeil-Lehrer NewsHour has been provided by a grant from ODS Health Plans, the group medical plans that meet the needs of Oregonians by providing a broad range of medical and dental coverage and responsive service. And by the Collins Foundation. The Collins Foundation is dedicated to improving the quality of life in Oregon.
This is Mark Russell coming up with the best of my comedy specials for 1994. The year was so funny. Every day